Boom. We are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thought it'd be fun to jump on and I think laugh a little bit first off because it's always a good medicine. But we wanted to talk about a few things today. Just here, we're going to use Bitcoin as the background for the most of this conversation. I just chatted with a really good buddy of mine who was living in Sri Lanka, and he was telling me about what he was currently having to go through and had actually currently gone through to leave Sri Lanka under the current chaotic, I guess, systemic breakdown that is taking place there. He's kind of reiterated the idea that most of this felt like it was coming from deep inherent corruption in a lot of the ecosystem and that massive amounts of debt. What we need to remember is most of these countries, actually all of them, I don't know if any of them that aren't, they're extraordinarily in debt. And when the market tightens and raises interest rates, it puts pretty much everybody under pressure. But who it hits first are actually the third world economies. Places like Turkey, Sri Lanka, Costa Rica is down 30%. I think the Japanese yen we looked the other day was down 30% against the US dollar. So we're seeing economic crisis everywhere outside of the kind of one of the main picture fold and narrative storytellers. So when most of the story that's actually taking place doesn't get told, you're not really given the best representation of what's going on. And the importance of something like Bitcoin in these moments is not its price value, but more so its functionality in space and time. Now, I have consistently reiterated that as time goes on and economies start to fail, they all kind of fail in the same way. They fail through, as we noted, corruption and a debasement of the monetary system, whichever one it happens to be based on at that moment. Here, it's the US dollar. Now, there's this kind of idea that the dollar is the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper, so it keeps being used, and one day it will collapse as well, but its kind of catastrophic breakdown extent is faster in the countries outside of that US dollar system. And those countries are currently being bought up by other countries that are also doing the same thing, which is leveraging debt and printing capital that they do not have. Now, we could make some really interesting conjecture around the growth potential of the human civilization and the species itself, which I think is a really good conversation and probably one of the most important ones. But here, Bitcoin looks great because as I was chatting with my friend and they were having to leave Sri Lanka, we talked about the importance of crypto as a crisis asset. Is that you can't go to the bank, you can't take out any money because they're not letting you. You can't do any transfers. Guess what? Because they've stopped letting you. But you know what you can do is you can just leave with your crypto. You can go land somewhere like Dubai or here in Costa Rica where you can find plenty of houses and vehicles for sale for a peer-to-peer marketplace entirely in crypto. This is not something that most people recognize the importance of yet because they live in a storybook narrative where everything is still A-okay. And this is a hard thing to kind of discuss because in our past, this has always happened. This is not new. And this is one of the concerning things, is that even though things seem to repeat themselves quite frequently, people still seem to ignore that. So you can have great lessons all the way along the way, and people will largely ignore it. For one, let's use a great lesson here of if you're new to the ecosystem here, or around we were at, I still stand by the idea, our basically our R is equal. We have equal risk to reward within the next like 12 months for Bitcoin's price. So its ability to go down and its ability to go up is pretty commonly weighted. So the only real way to endure any type of volatility in the markets is just be consistent with an investment strategy. Now that sounds super freaking simple, but as soon as you go start to do it, you get greedy, you start to want to do this, you pivot here, you don't properly execute a plan that you had. And one of the important things about a good strategy is it sets you up to align for that plan. Now, everyone lives in a different country, and therefore you're going to recognize different economic shocks as they happen. But I stand by the thesis that what we're about to witness over the next decade, maybe even faster, is a total systemic collapse of the financial system that exists, which is why Bitcoin was always so interesting to begin with. The profits are basically a symptom of that failing system alongside Bitcoin, giving it the appearance of this extraordinarily high US dollar value, when in fact it's other things that have been losing value dramatically versus the Bitcoin. So I said the Bitcoin, do you like that? It felt like 2017 again or something. So this type of chaos in the ecosystem is warranted and well enjoyed by those of us who have been here long enough to recognize that it's actually the tastiest time. So a lot of people are like, hey, this is one of the longest kind of bear drawdowns we've had in a while. And yeah, from peak to where we are today, we're already over 390 days, which is a nice extensive change. So there alone, we have a time function working in our favor. And secondarily, the piece that we got here, which is something if you follow closely, you don't just kind of skip through episodes. Although we have a dynamic thesis, the thesis has been we're in a trading range and probably a reaccumulation range of some kind, so roughly drawn like that. What that looks like is always different. It's a giant footprint in the sky right now of price, and we can't tell what that footprint's going to look like. Now, it's shaped itself pretty similarly to what I, again, think is a three-peak and a domed house, and it returns to 0.28. Now, we got that 0.28. I was being a little optimistic at around 40K, and again, I mentioned that. I said that, hey, look, it's 0.28 normally always returns down to 0.10, which is down here at 29 grand. And in the past, especially when we've seen these on longer time frames, 0.28 can slip like 10% below. So don't be afraid if we see something like this in Bitcoin happen. Now, again, what I think is unique here is that I think Bitcoin is the best stable coin, effectively. Not stable because of its price, but because of its relative function within that crisis that I mentioned. That's what originally drew me towards it. And for better or for worse, it's the way it's remained in the thesis. Now, clearly, people can like when asset prices go up, right? And there's a lot of ways you can manipulate and game systems to make this happen. But Bitcoin's been around for a really long time, and it gives itself a special set of features due to that durability through time. Now, big explosions of price, and then, let's take a look at our layer one kind of sector here, supposedly. So we've got FTM, Luna, Solana, Avalanche, and Near. Let's look at the similarities here. And what I want to talk about is something that most people probably don't understand, is that the reason why there's correlation has nothing to do with the asset's ability to disconnect from any other asset. It's that largely when people get scared, they all do the same thing. They act irrationally. So it doesn't really, and when they're greedy, they all basically do the same thing. They also then act irrationally. So Avalanche, let's actually get rid of the drawings here on Avalanche. So notice the time frame. Okay, so from 2021, this kind of first subsequent series, or this first kind of mountain range, we'll call it, and then the second mountain range. Let's just keep it simple for today. Again, here on Near, first mountain range, second mountain range. Okay, cool. Luna, first mountain range, second mountain range. Dang, all the way down to $3. I saw it as low as 70 cents earlier today. Like, that is just a catastrophic failure for Luna. Now, I want to get into this too much. Aside from, look, I was never super interested in Luna. It never ranked near the top of our list. We did think it was interesting, and we definitely like some of the stuff that's being built on it. But after going back and seeing some of the Do Kwon's tweets about a guy just being like, I won't talk to poor people. Okay, look, if you get to the top, you shouldn't be an asshole. It's just fair, because when you tell people you wouldn't talk to poor people, you actually sound really poor. But poor of character. And that's not a great look, regardless of how you look. Well, there are other people in this ecosystem who are not like that. Now, they'll make bets. I'm pretty sure Sam took a bet on Solana, but when it was $3, not when it was hundreds and hundreds. So, again, I think it's important to recognize that the growth of the ecosystem is not just based off the characters that are building within it, but the people that believe in those. Now, I kind of made a off-kilter joke about Do Kwon being the Theranos here, because this is one of the worst collapses we've seen from any token, unless it's a direct rug pull. But this looks like what happened through the nature of UST. It was basically an over margin position with limited capital, and what was in there as capital was very volatile. So we knew that algorithmic stablecoins are going to be trying to land rockets. It's going to be very difficult, and you're going to need a basket of something that's more stable. And Bitcoin, in my opinion, has been one of the most stable in this ecosystem. And this is why I still think over time people will recognize its importance as a money. However, we use as a currency to get, it could be Doge for all I can care. People can use whatever they want in currency transactions. I think that's fair. We've made this sentiment many times before. Currency is much more an indirect mode of transaction. It's actually much closer to the peer-to-peer side of things, which would be more like a barter trade, right? This is kind of the difference between money and currencies. How do you navigate these stable, long-stored, non-moving assets like a house or a property, or I guess wealth-generating businesses, like a business, or wealth-generating assets like a business, versus just currency? And what does a currency do within the ecosystem? And that is not totally yet defined, I think, due to the misjudging of nomenclature, but people still don't even understand that money and currency are drastically different things within their function. And currency is a hot potato. You wouldn't want to hold on to it too long. It in history has always been a liability. Now it's great for getting something in the short term like an asset, but on the long term it's been a liability. And the assets, even though there are moments in history when things goes blip blap and numbers flips upside down and things all appear crazy, assets have held out in the long term regardless of what the currency is. It's just a fact. Okay, so look at the similarity between each of these, though. And this is kind of the madness of crowds in chart form, I guess, or as some would probably understand it from my niche, like a mass psychosis formation. People all start to hallucinate the same vision. This is largely why currency works in the first place, as far as I can tell. People all hallucinating the same vision. How reliable that is or not is really not. There's no need for justification between this. So all of these, Ethereum, Avalanche, Near, Luna, Solana, and FTM all have a really similar, I don't have more data on FTM, but you'd see there's another blip here before this big move up. Very similar, pretty much identical actually. So one of the things that happens is in the beginning of the bull market, where we were back here, 2020, we see a huge run up. Great, this was amazing. Anyone who was playing here did really well. Even still today, you're still doing really well. And this is largely why we try to convince people of the importance of the long-term thesis. Because if we go back to Solana's data, like even the prior year before, like all you had to do was stay consistent. And most of this stuff over time washes out if you've made the right investment. Now, I have no clue, and as I've said this before, that any particular one of these layer ones is going to do what I think it's potentially capable of doing, right? It's Ethereum, Avalanche, Near. Now, Avalanche is still what I believe to be the strongest contender, and look how poorly it's performed since its high here. It's gone down 80%. Well, okay, so first off, it's gone down 80%, but when we first started being really excited and sharing it with everyone where we thought it was going, it was down here like $3, and then again at like $10. So I think that what so often happens is that because people write a story tale or a narrative, they don't understand that at one day these cataclysmic changes happen. They're kind of baked into the cake. We had a clear sentiment that $29,000 on Bitcoin was very likely for this particular trading range. Now, I think that most people think this is over. It's not. What else do you use? When economic sanctions around the world are disrupting some of the world's like supply chain, what is going to come out the ultimate winner from these wars? You're dealing with a very complex system of human nature, and I don't think that it's largely controllable. I think where we end up is often by accident, and I think most great scientists and inventors will tell you this. Like serendipity is not by choice. Now we can put ourselves in the position to appreciate that as much as possible, but how it happens is not really up to one person. So what does this mean? It's a bunch of ranting in the morning. I still stand by this thesis. I think this is the bottom of the trading range. This is an extension within the accumulation pattern that we are already looking for. I feel normal. Now, again, damn, that was a big, like 30% drop for Avalanche today. Right, but this we have said frequently, and try to repeat the mantra almost on every episode, is that this is venture capital. And with venture capital, we look at it very simply. Heads we win, tails we don't lose much. Now, how much isn't much to you, I guess, really depends on how much your monthly budgeting likes to fit. Some people make a bunch of money and they instantly start to spend all of that money that they have. I myself like to not live too frivolously and keep things pretty mellow. My budget over the course of 5 years is actually very manageable because it's not, I don't find joy in just spending money on ridiculous things. Now, every now and then you need a good piece of gear or something. This makes sense. I need a tool. I want X like place to swim. So it's important to enjoy life, but ultimately it's actually pretty easy to budget. And I think most people, when they start to make more money, they also then just increase their spending. So learning how to budget, and this is another thing we've consistently gone over, is understanding your multi-year budget allows you to execute a perfect investment strategy, which is how much are we investing every month. These should look like bills, whether it's a $500 bill or a $500,000 bill every month. It's really up to your ability to generate revenue. That's largely the kind of the simple part of the thesis. But we always go out, we try to complicate things. We think that we're going to beat the market and that these drawdowns are not unheard of. Well, no, we look every time we've looked in the past of every single asset we've ever invested in. They all do that at one point or another. So you have to measure in the thing that has always happened, which is what stuns me again so much about this thesis, is people don't. It's like, hey, look, guys, every time throughout history, society has collapsed due to some like malfeasance and corruption in the sources that are at bay. And then the debate's been of money very, very shortly afterwards. Like they go hand in hand dancing down the Golden Brick Road or something. So I think that it's important to understand that because these things are repeating themselves, we shouldn't be too worried about it. Just be well positioned. Again, this is a beautiful, beautiful explanation of why consistency, I think, will pay off, and probably not too far in the future. There's a lot of people who think that the sentiment is wrecked. It is not. I disagree with Benjamin Cohen. The sentiment is not wrecked. It might be wrecked for the retail investor, but the big players, they got tons of cash and capital on the side, and they're not impatient with their buying strategies. They will take years to build a position. I highly suggest the book Reminiscence of a Stock Operator. It was written in the 1930s, and when people build positions, whether it was in the 1930s or today, it just doesn't happen overnight. I think it was one of probably the red flags was the LFG guys being like, hey, we bought all of our $3 billion in just like a day. Well, you did what? How did you... Why would you even execute a strategy in such short order of time? Doesn't make sense. Good strategies should take time. Like Apple, all these huge megalithic ideas, they didn't grow overnight. So I think largely you're looking for the people that are builders and calm and patient builders, because it's usually who ends up with the best result. But also be prepared for that downside. Measure in these risks every time. Like when we say venture capital, we mean like risky is. That's why we say it could go to zero all the time. Bitcoin, the only one in our strategy list that I feel has surpassed that moment of time in durability standards. Everything else is too young still, but that's also why we like it. The upside potential is so much higher. Now, anyways, that's just kind of my first rant bit. So what happened to Avalanche here? Not a big worry. That's fine. Yes, there's always better profit-taking strategies, but largely, again, when we play out the story of time, those profit strategies end up in net losses. Sequoia put out a great article of like, hey, we lost $8 billion a year by taking profit. We could have sat and done nothing and made more money. And this is one of the hardest things to get about doing a portfolio right, is that if you do it right, you can literally sit and do nothing and make more money, but you have to be patient and on the long-term horizon. So I stand by the strategy. I also think that I think the Bitcoin is actually really well positioned here. This looks sexy to me. This is exactly what we wanted, right? This puts it right alongside our S&P 500 thesis. So here we go. Here's the two of them. Now, the S&P 500 in 2008 came down with a big clamor, and a lot of people have been comparing this to this drop to the S&P 500 or during 2008. So here at the bottom screen, the pink one, this is the S&P 500 at the bottom of 2008, effectively. And you can see here, as we said before, it slipped around. Actually, let's measure from the bottom of 0.10. We'll put a candle wick on here too, so it's nice and clean. bottom of 0.10. It slipped another 11 to 12% below. So if we were to slip the same way S&P slipped here, that would put us at around $25,000, probably at the lowest. I don't think there's enough supply for that to happen. I really don't. After we saw the shakeout here, we did see. Oh, okay. Hold on a sec. I'm gonna log in here. Okay, so here's this supply of LFG coming onto the market in the last few days. So first off, you can see that everything that was bought by them has been put back into the market, and then in a very short order. So two things happened. A, the part of the Bitcoin market that was generally leveraged through itself in some Ouroboros type snake, it appears, is now back on the market, and that's great. So the price reacted, but look how little actually further it dropped compared to how much market. Like, that's a big chunk that came into the market overnight. that was like all of the LFG Foundation's Bitcoin, I believe. It was not a small amount. The other thing that's important too is to remember that time, like when I say time, it's usually on the function of 2 to 3 years. Like, these are not short frames, so it's really important to remember that. So again, down below S&P 500, again, what looks like a unique double top, right? Most people would be very bearish about this. They would think that, oh my God, it's going to come back down to 23 points. It's going to have to build up here forever. Because that's what a lot of people were calling for in the 2008 collapse. Oh, it's going to go much further. It looked like it was going to. And lo and behold, what do? They just started printing. So there's two things that are going to happen right now. One of two. That's it. They're going to print, inflate capital even further, drive the markets back into sanity, or they're going to do something that is very malicious, and they're going to continue to increase rates, and they're going to put every single third world economic emerging economy under the bus. Yeah, they're going to throw them all under the bus effectively. One of those two things will happen. If they increase interest rates, it'll look great for the dollar, and they'll be able to rinse out a bunch of countries. I'd be hard pressed to see them not to do it. So again, we're expecting downside here. They also said that they're going to sell like some few $100 billion of assets that they own every month. So when we go back to the S&P 500, and again, the long-winded short answer of this thesis is whoever's in. They are, because I don't even want to guess. It's a group of calamitous people. I guess collaborated, whether on purpose or by accident, on how the economic system runs, are basically in charge of the death spiral that will take place here. So we're up extraordinarily high on the S&P 500. And this is one of the things we're ultimately really excited about. Is although I don't think this bodes well for most stocks, especially as crisis starts to hit, I think it's very good for Bitcoin, because every time I've seen crisis hit Bitcoin, people start to remember how valuable it is to be able to leave a country, that it has control over what your assets can do, and go anywhere else in the world with those assets, and with very little possibility to stop you. Again, you can remember if you can remember 24 words, you can walk across every border with billions of dollars. I still don't think the degree of that has settled into the atmosphere of people's minds. Like, that's a big deal, especially whether you think it would be for a terrorist that would use it, or just someone who's simply trying to flee the government that over top of them has done things that is atrocious. And that's pretty much true of every government at this point. You'd want to maybe escape and go somewhere else that's a bit more friendly, peaceful, and interested in a community future. So we're in a really unique predicament here. I think that a lot of the last few decades of printing is going to come to a face here. And one of the reasons why we think that is that the growth of this has just become parabolic. If you take a look at, let's go over here. And again, so I suspect that one day we're going to see the numbers flip all weird, upside down and backwards, forwards. It's going to look super weird. But what you're going to want to have on the other side of it is really valuable assets. Home, water, food, Bitcoin. I mean, you could put gold and silver in there too. They've been just been a standard of some type of store value for so long. I doubt it's going to lose that veneer. I don't think it's got a lot of room for upside either, but It's definitely not going to lose the veneer of where it already sits. Where's the ICX here? There we go, IXCX. Let's drag closer to the S&P so it's easier next time. Okay, so we've made this comparison a bunch. We normally use the S&P 500. We're getting into a place of unsustainable, basically exponential growth. These things almost inevitably always break down anytime you get towards an exponential growth curve, and they usually fall down just as quickly. And what we've been doing to compare that is the monetary stock, or the supply of money that they've printed into the ecosystem. And when you put from 2000 into today in perspective only, you can see here that they're basically neck and neck. The only reason the markets have gone up is because they've inflated the supply. If they stop inflating the supply, the market's going to do nothing but collapse, because it's a house of cards built on debt, on debt, on debt, the same way that LFG was. And this will they just had a lot more credibility than LFG, I guess it was, for decades. Well, also nuclear power of any kind is actually pretty prominent. I'm always a little upset that I don't have a nuclear reactor on my property, but I just want to make sure it's small enough. Anyways, the point of this is as these things start to turn more into crisis mode, I think Bitcoin's going to shine. I think people start to realize the value of assets, that they can move around the world without anyone being in control of it other than themselves. That's an extraordinarily valuable system function that you just don't have with cash or with your bank cards or your identity often even as well. So I think society is going to hit a point of necessity. It's probably not going to be a lot of fun, but on the other side, I think is going to be an absolutely interesting and beautiful conversation, hopefully around the rebirth of science, because it has also been, I think anyone who's paying attention can tell, it's been absolutely totally hollowed out and corrupted as well. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more thoughts. Again, ultimately, I'm still very bullish on Bitcoin. I think a lot of people think that it's over for this, and hey, maybe they're right, but I've felt that we were going to go into a larger reaccumulation range from way back here. I'm like, I think we're going to hit a reaccumulation range. Now, obviously, get excited. I thought we were going to maybe break out up here and just see a much stronger part of the reaccumulation pattern, but no, we didn't. So we're back down at a reaccumulation pattern. Again, this is the thing about trying to figure out a footprint. It's like, we know there's a footprint here. What's it going to look like? I think it looks like this. I think ultimately it looks like with the S&P 500. There's a few other in the NASDAQ. We've seen it a few times as well. Anyways, the point of this is I'm ultimately very bullish still, even though I think a lot of people are not. The average retail investor is not going to be comfortable here for a little while, but I don't really think this market's built on retail investors anymore. After I've had the chance to speak with a bunch of the changing industry that's taken place here from when 2017, when we first started playing around to on YouTube, to today. Actually, it was a little bit earlier, but unimportant. We've seen such a dramatic shift in the average participant. We were everybody was retail in 2017. This is made up of much longer participants, family offices, and they've got a longer time horizon on how these things play out. So I think that this is a reaccumulation still. I feel confident about that. Yes, it sucks to be in volatile venture capital, but we'll keep repeating the mantra: heads we win, tails we only lose a little. Right? You want to make sure that only lose a little, as I said many times before, is basically your leading standpoint, because venture capital is volatile. It's going to go up 10,000% and come down the 90 or 9,000%. You got to understand that that's just par for the course at this point. And I guess the kind of necessity of a financial product that is not tied to any government is ridiculously valuable, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that can be overstated. So whatever Bitcoin's doing today, my assessment is 3 peaks, domed house, still in play. Again, we could slip down to 24,000, sure. I think that was kind of the top peak of the fear, though. And look at that supply. I don't see how much more supply comes in. That was a big chunk. So we'll see over the next few days. I guess what we could do is we could take a closer look here at Bitcoin's price. Let's take a look at the candle action. Although, again, we did get something we really wanted here. This huge amount of supply coming into the market. Yes, that's a test, ladies and gentlemen. We wanted that. And as we get closer, I bet you we'll be able to dissect something that looks pretty tasty here. Okay, so when we get to the bottom here, what we're always looking at is how much supply was chewed up for how much price was taken away. So there's clearly big buyers that came in here. Small buyer, small buyer. Wow, and here too. What's interesting here on this candle, which again, this is probably the localized bottom, we get a bounce of some kind from here. What that looks like still we'll have to figure out. It will tell us if we're going to go to that 24,000 spot or not. But this supply candle was a nice test because we are actually currently chewed up all of the supply and are up near the top of the price candle itself too. So that looks like a good absorption candle. And on the daily, it looks almost all like absorption here because you start to see the price action diminish every time, both in spread and in supply itself. Still high though, so we could see it slip again. I think 10% below is probably pretty good. But other than that, I still think very, very strongly that we're in this trading range that's just headed for larger reaccumulation. Nothing in the story has changed. Everything's still broken. Every country is massively in debt, and there is no other solution for the monetary system. I don't see anything else even remotely close. And it's actually one of its unique functions is that the governments don't need to trust each other. China doesn't need to trust Russia. Russia doesn't need to trust Japan. They can use the system trusting the technology. And that in itself, I think, again, has still not yet been totally reconciled with the way people view this market. Okay, we'll take a look at a few of your thoughts. I don't get Luna can crash 95%. Why is everyone dumping it? It seems, again, like, I don't know too much about how they built their treasury around UST, but it seems like they had a basket of ideas within this UST algorithmic basket, and that the goal of the basket mechanism was to sell the treasury to keep the peg. So that you're relying on people's ability to buy all of those assets and then convert them for dollars or some type of stable thing that they're interested in, because now they're losing money instead of making it. Everyone's happy when they're making money, but it's when they're losing money they start to get upset. So as they start to lose money, they want to cut that risk. People keep selling. The market mechanism as a blockchain can probably only eat up so much at a time. People get scared, frantic in the moment. Everything is over. It's going to zero. And lo and behold, Luna was down at like 70 cents at one point. That's just astonishing. So I think, the Ouroboros, for those of you that don't know, is a snake that eats its tail. So this was an Ouroboros moment, I think, for the LFG Foundation, where effectively what you had was just this spiral of itself eating itself, selling internal assets to try to recover a peg. Like, what's UST even at right now? Again, not bashing on them. I think we need a stable algorithmic token of some kind, but apparently that's not how you do it. Well, we know again now how not to do it. If they were Musk trying to build rockets, they would have given up the third time something broke and did crash and didn't work. You got to have a long-term vision. Sometimes you're going to crash a bunch of rockets, and it's going to cost a lot of money. Just I guess the downside is most people are still not they don't totally grasp it. But hey, I think all of you have graduated now, by the way. It probably means a bunch of you new investors have graduated to understanding like how a long-term story is going to play out anyways. So congratulations on that. You're going to be more successful now. Learning these experiences are only by living them. One of the things, where would you want to go? Oh, UST, I have to add it probably. UST to Tether on Binance. Oh yeah, wow, it's at 50 cents. And what was its lowest? It was down at a 22-cent peg. That's just crazy. So yeah, this is like a snake eating itself. That's how I would envision it. Kind of a one sale into another. Let's go back here. 3 peaks in a domed house. And normally after you get a bunch of down days like this, you do get some reprieve. So it's likely we see a bounce. And look at how much of the market it absorbed right there. That's fantastic. Let's see. Check some questions. Cliff High called this, said it's going to be a huge financial event on May 9th, culminates on 19th. Also, a few months ago said there was going to be a 99% collapse in crypto that may hurt Luna. Amazon has crashed 90%. They all have at one point, so it's not unheard of, effectively, right? We expect that. It's where it goes on the multi-year story, I guess. Can you interview Cliff High? I would love to open up a different podcast channel again where I can just talk to random, fun, and interesting people. We'll probably do that again in the future, but for now, it's just easier to stay focused on the venture stuff. Again, with Bitcoin being our guiding light, we're still making venture investments. Nothing changes. Just invest in people that are building for the next few years. Although, again, I don't think it takes that long. I don't think this wrecked the sentiment for the market, not for the bigger players. The bigger players know how to chew this up. They're generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue on a month basis anyways. They're just like, great, better average. Dalton but call me says Do Kwon was too busy smoking and drinking expensive products, trolling trolls on the internet and lost sight. Yeah, after I read some of his tweets there, about, again, just like, oh, I don't hang out with poor people. Like, oh, dude, that's just poor character. Like, you're clearly poor. You might have a lot of money, but your character is clearly poor. It's just a kind of an ignorant thing to say. So people would want to say karma or whatever. Obviously, it sucks for anyone that was holding Luna. And again, I think that the best lesson usually comes from those moments. So, hey, a lesson. But yeah, just that type of cockiness, I think, coming from anyone who's a founder or a leader in the space is probably not great. It just doesn't bode well for, there are a lot of poor people on the planet. In fact, most of the financially poor people are everybody on the planet. So why would you want to, why would you want to aim at the like 99% in comparison, right? It's just kind of, I think, an ignorant standpoint for any leader in any sector, especially one that has such a huge potential for lifting the impoverished out by providing them a better financial service. And here he did exactly the opposite. So I've quite a poor character that had a lot of money. Or maybe he still has, I'm not sure. He probably was taking profits on the way down there himself. Maybe not, though. I mean, it's just hearsay. Okay, alleged hearsay. Shout out to the Arcane Bear from Venezuela. Well, great. Hope things are going well down there. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate all the kind comments. It's just so I'll read them. It says, Tio, you're my hero. You guys are sweet. This is why I say my kind comments, by the way. It's an arcane bear market time. This bear is just getting started. See, I don't think so. I don't think the bear is just getting started. We're already 390 days into it. And we were not very many days outside of the back of the last one. And I think, again, when capital starts to flee, you'll see something totally different. Bitcoin will enter a run that's basically, it'll extend any bull market that we've ever seen before. And I believe it happens right after this. I think that this is the time that there's a few things that give me the signals like, look, guys, I love the scientific discussion, and it has been totally carved out and thrown in the garbage the last 2 or 3 years. You can't even have it anymore. And those are warning and danger signals like society cannot even comprehend, apparently. So because of that, I think that we're right next to probably one of the largest pivotal economic moments that are not just our generation, but likely for a few generations we'll see. So should be prepared for that. And I think Bitcoin is one of the ways through that. Again, there's going to be a moment when the prices look stupid. Like, let's say all of a sudden, just because of the way the numbers work on the screen, Bitcoin appears to be at $2,000 and you sell, and then like 48 hours later, it's at $80,000. These markets are so illiquid, and they're not even capable of handling most of the transactions that come through on the big market side. Like, look at how Ethereum gas gets jacked up when people want to buy other side landies. Like, when there's congestion, it becomes inaccessible. And I think there'll be a point where people start to buy Bitcoin hand over fist as economies around them start to fail. Like what's happening in Sri Lanka is not just going to stay there. This will inevitably affect the entire world. Everybody's bankrupt, and all the corrupt, apparently all the politicians are corrupt. So this looks like a demolition time to me. And it would be much needed too. So one of the things that's been part of our thesis in Bitcoin since it was $200, since it was $90. So I don't. Nothing's changed that. It's just the landscape has changed, and now where we are appears to be like the sequence of events I've read in history, where they talk about it too. Like there's so many books that kind of go over the failings of history and recite some of the echoes. Like George Orwell's book 1984. Really, what it was doing is reciting a lot of the echoes that they were witnessing in their time of what was happening exactly then and there. But then they envisioned it with an even further state of regard. And I think what we're seeing right now is just one of those moments where there's something desperately wrong with the financial system. It's been built on corruption for longer than anyone can imagine, so long that people believe that it's actually okay. It's not. And when people start to recognize that, where are they going to go? They have literally almost nowhere to go aside from a few productive assets that still exist in the world. So farmland, water. Bitcoin isn't at 30K. How is it not a bear? Well, first off, bears are accumulation cycles. So we believe we've been in an accumulation cycle. We've said that for a while now. So a bear market is an accumulation cycle. But anytime Bitcoin's been below its all-time high would be the best time to buy. I think that where we are right now is much different than the previous accumulation cycles. This, in my mind, is a re-accumulation cycle. This is a secondary market piece of the last 3 years of accumulation that we'd already gone through between 2017 and 2020. So this is, in my opinion, a reaccumulation cycle, very similar to what we saw in the S&P 500. And then after here, it just basically goes up and up and up and up with no real bear market for probably 3 to 5 years afterwards. So this is a huge moment, I think, for Bitcoin. Now, I could be wrong. I could be totally fucking wrong. So let's find out. Again, I think either way you're investing, you should have somewhat of the regard still. Heads I win, tails I don't lose much. Anyways, just an important part of validating the fact that we like volatility. We're here because we like the upside. Also comes tinged with some downside, but damn, that upside still every time, over time, has been ultimately very rewarding. So yeah, I don't think this is a bear market. I think this is a reaccumulation market. You could call any accumulation market a bear market by technicality of that's what bears do, is like to accumulate. So I think this is a good standard there. But I'm very bullish here, especially as we get low. Like what's our fear index at? Like, oh yeah, we're jacked right back down to like 10 or 11. This is great. Technically, this is great news. This is what you want. Anyways, I'm still ultimately positive. Again, with the rest of the venture capital sector, yeah, we saw huge pivots again, a drop in Avalanche again from the previous high of $148 at 74% is dramatic. But we're still up, just not the 30x it was a little while ago. So that's okay. Patience always seems to pay off. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see, a few more thoughts and questions from you guys before I dive off. Also, remember to subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that. Silver is the most undervalued asset. That might be true. I mean, we use it for a lot of things. Like that might be true. I don't know enough about the supply of silver versus the demand. I'm betting on sovereign money. Yeah, you think that in actual essence, if you were to remove Bitcoin's technical parts and just aim at like what sovereign money, identity, or governance look like, those are all amazing investments over the next decade because they're so desperately needed. Sovereign money, sovereign identity, and sovereign governance, and we are solving a lot of the problems that we already have today. Anyways, I just thought we'd jump in, share that little bit this morning. Ultimately, still very excited about Bitcoin. Everything else is venture capital. Clearly, as Luna just proved, it can go to basically zero overnight. but you should be prepared for that. As I've said this a few times, everything outside of Bitcoin in this sector, I would view as a venture capital bet, which is there's none of these have durability to say they're going to last through the next 10 or 15 years. Bitcoin is the first and only one that has really gone public. Now, again, we enjoy the upside, but just understand that there is downside that's correlated with that, which is why we always recommend patient, conviction building investment styles that are month-over-month strategies, very similar to how you would pay off any or buy anything through like a structured 24 to 36 month plan. Sometimes it's fun to go all in, balls deep, but that's usually when people are dramatically panicked. Maybe like right now. I don't think people are sufficiently panicked. We would need, if we saw a nuclear bomb go off somewhere and then we went down to 24, I would say I'm going all in again because we just had some real blood in the streets. You kind of almost have to be you have to tune a part of your eye to see the sociopathic nature of entering at a good time, which is when everyone's freaking out, buying toilet paper and scared for grandma. And that's when you double, triple X down on Bitcoin back in March of 2020, or look for a moment like that again. I don't think it's here today, although we have seen a lot of fear in the streets, but I haven't seen too much blood yet. And again, that's kind of one of the abstractions of that quote that most people don't get. It's like, no, that's a very real sentiment. It's not just, hey, the markets are red. No, they're talking about when people are jumping out of buildings or dying from unknown diseases or in war. It's real, literal people at the table here. So I think it's a time to understand that the best time to invest is actually often one of the most solemn times for humans, because it's when they're the most irrational to the downside about prices of what the future might look like. Anyways, just something weird to think about there to leave you off your morning. Stay with the Arcane Bear. Thank you all for joining us today. Be patient. Yeah, wow, I wouldn't have guessed Luna come down here, but I saw a few people saying Luna was going to go back to $10. They're right, and maybe faster than they had anticipated. So keep that in mind. Stay with the Arcane Bear. We'll see you on the next episode.